Dean, I've been thinking about what you said and about the things that you have done. Right. What have you done and where do these things kind of come into it that will make you someone that someone can't wait to employ or engage, I suppose is probably the better word.
Well, I tell you the benefit. So the more extreme things that we've been talking about, so like the tattoo and how that physicality is affected in the digital environment, that tells you about the kind of clients I've worked with, from Disney to Apple to automotive brands, that it's about investing time in thinking about the extension of a brand. So, for instance, Disney is always an example I'll always give. So, you know, at the early stages, we were investigating virtual worlds in VR that eventually became 3D environments, and that was taken across a flat environment for iPad, for iPhone, for those kind of experiences. Now, Disney are a brilliant example because if you think of a licensed property within the Disney world, they can then take that from one single digital experience to apply it across a physical theme park, across something where they'll sell the products based in a store, where they'll give you an on-screen viewing experience across Disney+. So that brand extension is to take something to the extremes so that you can then say, well, actually, this is our pinnacle of experience. How do we apply that across the rest of the business? So, for example, again, if you think about mobility and automotive brands, the biggest issue and the biggest roadblock, no pun intended, to sales, to service, to the smooth running and fluidity of a business is when one piece of the business doesn't talk to another. So when you're doing whatever your marketing collateral is doing to draw people into either a physical retail environment or somewhere online to sell something, and then there is a system or a human interaction that is a block before taking you on somewhere else, then if you haven't got all of that roadmap laid out, then where you take someone from onboarding them in a marketing environment to 3 years down the line of ownership and keeping them on board, they are essentially a bunch of independent little projects that don't do and don't deliver what they should do. Again, you can apply that to the real challenge of self-driving cars. Because if your story is, from a marketing perspective, we've got the greatest self-driving cars in the business, it's okay, you're not going to die. I mean, essentially, that's the best you can offer, because at the moment, if the majority of people haven't experienced that, that's the only message they're going to get. You will not get that unless you sit someone in a car, or you have someone that you actually understand and you respect telling you you're not going to die. And
that's you, basically. Yeah. So what are you doing? You're onboarding or hand-holding sales teams, maybe, that don't know anything about the metaverse, don't know anything about VR or anything, but because you've got this huge experience, you're one of the pioneers, one small step for VR, one giant leap for VR kind of whatever. The fact that you're experienced and seasoned in these areas gives you a huge advantage to other people trying to do the same thing, or is that shilling you too much?
No, it gives a huge advantage for one singular reason, because I am a huge, I will champion technology. I'll champion the creative possibilities of that technology, but I will also be the devil's advocate and say exactly why it won't work. So for instance, if you're a big brand, the people you shouldn't be employing are those that simply say everything's great, everything's amazing, and this is exactly what will happen. Because essentially they're saying, well, what are we going to change here? What do we do next? So for instance, the metaverse, VR, and So it's a metaverse. It is more encompassing than simply VR. It's AR, and the example I'd give is a kind of a 3D lenticular plasma screen. When you think about what goes in, what comes out, and what sits on the screen. But the metaverse is one of those places where, actually, from my experience, unless you extend what you've done in the metaverse and bring it out with you, you've lost all of the greatest opportunities. Yes, we're talking about NFT and buying things in the metaverse, but most people, unless you're genuinely plugged into the thing, live outside the metaverse. So unless you bring something out and you have a reason to either re-engage with that brand or want to live with the product again, you're not going to do that. And the best example I've got, Lockheed Martin a few years ago essentially created this school bus, and the windows inside were photochromatic, and they actually displayed the view outside the bus as it was going on. So it's full of school kids. They drove through a tunnel, and as they emerged from the tunnel on the other side, the screens kicked in, and they showed the surface of Mars. So this was a virtual experience without a headset on. So they were together. They were experiencing this,
yeah.
And each of those kids came out the other side, and they were, as much as we've been talking about the passion that's brought to you by the space race, that each of those kids were absolutely driven by the fact that they wanted to do something. They didn't want to go back into VR. They didn't want to do that. What they wanted to do was something in the real world. They were compelled. They wanted to be astronauts. They wanted to be scientists. They wanted to this. They wanted to achieve. And that is the thing in the real world that extends a brand, gives you that ownership.
Yeah, and I get that. I personally think VR's the work of the devil. And metaverses. I think there's only 8 metaverses. Is that right? There are different types of metaverse.
It's an interesting conversation. And if you're going to talk about, actually, there's only one metaverse. Like there's only one internet.
Yeah. Okay.
What will exist is those environments in much the same way as we have an app store and we have Google Play and we have all of these things. There will be a loosely walled garden that allows us to access everybody else's product and environment and experience. So once you start looking at it like that, rather than hang on a minute, we haven't created the metaverse yet. What we actually haven't done is populate it with the right kind of things.
Yeah, no, I'm just thinking maybe the CMO will turn from Chief Marketing Officer to Chief Metaverse Officer. If that happens, I think I might just jump off a building, a high building. But I'm just thinking kind of on the hoof here, is that the stuff that you've done for companies and the experience that you've made and the pioneering status I think you deserve, it's not so much what you can do for companies, it's and bring them value. Obviously you can, you know what I mean, because of who you've worked with, the brands that you've worked with. But it's also being able to save them money by telling them what not to do.
Absolutely.
Would that be right?
Yeah. Oh God. I mean, and that's one of the things about actually telling the truth about technology.
Yes. Yeah.
Is that you spend far more time saying that doesn't work, don't go in that direction, don't do this, which is far more valuable than chasing something up completely the wrong alley. And that doesn't mean that you won't ever do it. That just means that you need to do the right thing in the right place at the right time.
No, I think Google Glass or that type of technology will come back.
Yeah.
I think the first version was so appalling that it put people off for ages. No, but I think that's really interesting, because the amount of time and resource that is wasted on someone or a brand thinking they know what they're doing, but they don't really know what they're doing, and bringing in the wrong person at the wrong time, that could cost them oodles of money.
Yeah, and there is a balance, because there is genuinely mileage in being the first. But that's if you approach something from a PR perspective. If your end game is that you want to be known as the first to do something, then that's great. But if you're simply driving ahead and you're changing your business model to follow the latest thing, then you have to actually be damn sure that that is going to deliver on your if your ROI is based entirely on NFTs right now, then that's great if you're in it for the short win. But if you're unless you're thinking long term and how that genuinely offers some value, then you may be in the wrong place.
Well, if I set up a brand and I'm about to get into the metaverse, I'll give you a call if that's okay.
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much.